In some of my last videos, I was getting into something that I've touched on many times before, which is a sort of perhaps unconscious belief in modern, sort of the modern era of literature that the romantic side of literature is a thing of the past and realism is something of the present. Understanding that I'm not talking about romance like love. I'm talking about something more on the lines of romanticism. Um, but I want to get a little bit more into that because I think one of the attempts, I think, sometimes I think dragging literature down into this kind of less or subpar kind of style is really about trying to seem more relatable, more down to earth. Which I think can make it even more annoying. It's like it's as I've explained before, it can be kind of a false modesty, and also a fear, a genuine fear of going into more like bigger ideas or unknown territory. So there's a lack of mystery in the writing, which I think the writing should always have an element of mystery in it. And I guess just as just kind of as an example, like when I've been reading the book Pale Fire, which, in case you haven't watched my last videos, I've noticed that the novel Pale Fire by Vladimir Nabokov is very much the antithesis of all of these problems. Like because it was considered really the last really good novel. It explores a lot of big ideas. Kim Boat is the narrator, the sort of unreliable narrator. He's very biased and has a negative view of this poet named John Shade, all of which it's all fictional. There's no such poet. And John Shade writes a poem called Pale Fire. And Pale Fire explores issues, I'm just starting to get into this book, and so I'm sort of slowly gleaning or getting a clearer picture of what the story is about. But there's many references to the afterlife. One of which is that John Shade has I can't remember, it's a stroke, I think, not a heart attack, stroke, and he has a vision of the afterlife. Like he crosses over an out-of-body experience when he comes very close to death, where he sees a white fountain. And so then he thinks very deeply, broods about this for a very long time, wonders, well, was this just, how can we prove really that this stuff is real? And then one day he comes across this story, sees the headline, and it's a story about a woman who also had a near-death experience, where she describes as a place that had what is called the hint of angels, which is kind of an interesting phrase. And like she sees stained glass windows with light glinted on the stained glass windows, soft music playing. And at one point she also mentions seeing a white fountain, which gives him some hope. And thinks maybe, okay, if somebody else is experiencing it, maybe there's what I experienced actually something that has an independent existence. That it's not something that my mind simply fabricated. However, to his disappointment, later on, he finds out that it was a misprint in the newspaper. That instead, what she really meant to say, what was actually said, was that she saw a white mountain in this afterlife. So that again introduces another layer of interesting ambiguity to the story. And a lot of questions remain unanswered. But I think this is an example, this is really ingenious, I think, but this is an example where I think that another type of writer who is maybe a more contemporary writer that kind of falls into the different, more of the line of thinking that I was talking about earlier, I think in the efforts to try to appeal to the common person, or to try to seem more down to earth, more whatever the word is I'm looking for, gritty, they might instead try to be ironic or sarcastic with an idea like this. Like they would, they'd make God into a, whatever, an alcoholic, a drunk, and they would make, they kind of almost like try to make a joke out of it to try to make it seem like, oh, I don't take this sort of too seriously. I try to seem more like something that I think that people that won't bore people, that'll just be kind of entertaining. Whereas I think that when you look at some of the older writers, like who were just meeting just at the precipice of when literature is starting to decline, they don't really hold back as much. Like they will introduce many of these ideas that have been talked about for ages in a way that is just as serious. But I think also what has taught me personally as a writer is that there's a phrase I remember, I think Leonardo da Vinci said it, that simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication, is what he said. And I think scenes like that I just told you about, the hint of angels and everything, that's an indication of it, is that, having the romanticism in writing is not to be confused with excess or because I think sometimes, of course, the realists will think that the problem with romanticism is that it's like the equivalent of dumping a bunch of glitter on a picture, or and to try to make it look, or dumping too much. It's like, no, every detail is very economical in this writing. He only writes what is absolutely necessary. So it's that it is about, like I said, brevity is the soul of wit. It's very simple. It's very concise. And I think that's what's powerful about it, and particularly with what I've been learning when it comes to world building. And as a writer, is that less is more. That he doesn't give you too much; he just gives you just enough. And so there's an element of mystery. Like I said, which is having an element of mystery is also what's very prevalent in romanticism, and so that's partly, I think, why it strikes you on that level when you read it.